And today we're thrilled to be talking to Randy Garg. Randy has passionately worked with dozens of emerging tech companies in the last 25 plus years in a variety of different capacities. He's going to tell us a little bit more about his career journey in a moment, but please join me in welcoming him to our roundtable today. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you, Joe. Great to be here.
Really, really great to have you, and great to see how many interested participants we've got. I'll just, on a housekeeping note, just a reminder to everyone, don't hesitate to raise your questions in the chat if anything occurs to you as you go through. We like these sessions to be as interactive as they can be. Okay, Randy, perhaps we could start by you just talking us through your career a little bit. How did you get attracted to this crazy world of tech?
How did I get attracted? So yeah, it's been 25 plus years. I actually did the math and it's about 28 years. And just given the way the years fall, I'm embarrassingly now in my fourth decade of investing in tech. So by either measure, I sound pretty old. So yeah, transplant from Toronto, came out to go to UBC in 91, graduated in 93 and got straight into the venture capital game. I was a principal at a firm, Discovery Capital, that some of you might be familiar with back in the 90s. Did that for about 12 years, backs, early backers of companies like CR Wireless and ALI Technologies that have become stalwarts in the community. They went on to back Avigilon, for example, as well. Kind of after the dot-com bust, I decided to take a walk on the dark side and went into investment banking for a little while. So I did the corporate finance work with one of the major accounting firms here, where I helped sell a bunch of those companies I used to put money into. But my passion's always been on the investing side, so really wanted to get back into that. So back in 2010, I joined my good friend Ryan Beatty and set up a family office fund with him to go back and invest in more growth stage technology companies at that point in time. Having done the earlier venture stage companies earlier on, been focused more on the growth stage. Fast forward to 2015, spun out of there, created Vistara Capital. Vistara is a Sanskrit word for expansion. So that's kind of what our core ethos is around here. We're really looking for ways to help and support and grow tech companies. So I've been doing that since 2015, and things are going pretty well. I'm happy to share more details on Vistara.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that in a moment. Maybe I'll just to take a step back, because COVID has been the big reality for this year. What did COVID look like to an investment firm? So how did it impact you and the team at Vistara? How were you able to adapt? Has it ended up being a busy year for you or a less busy year?
Well, so the last flight I was on was back in February of 2020, which is shocking because our lives end up being, a lot of travel and visiting companies, attending growth conferences, all of that. So right out of the gate, when things started locking down in the spring of 2020, we actually had 3 deals that we closed pretty quickly. And these were companies that we were comfortable with. We met the principals before the lockdown. We were assessing how strong they were, what their likelihood of surviving through this shock would be, and we got very comfortable with what they were doing. And in fact, in all those cases, their businesses were likely going to accelerate if this work from home lockdown situation persisted. So we got those done in the early stage, and then it got harder to meet new companies. So as an investment firm, there's a supply and demand. So you've got you have people providing you capital, but then you have to put it out the door as well. So where do you meet those companies? And contrary to popular belief, we have to get out to meet those companies. They don't just come banging on the door and looking for cash. So that was kind of the harder part. Creating relationships was hard, virtually over Zoom. I have to say, though, doing due diligence on companies wasn't that much of a challenge. With a lot of these companies, you're not visiting manufacturing plants or anything like that anyways. So that can be done virtually. In fact, doing customer calls and analyst calls, we used to do that by way of telephone, the fact that we could do it over Zoom and catch people's body language was kind of interesting when you ask the tough questions. So overall, it's been fine. And tech has really shone through this whole COVID process. So and a number of our companies have seen their businesses accelerate through the process.
That's great to hear. So let's get in a moment. Let's get into that in a little bit more depth, and I'll ask you about what you've seen across North America. But before we do that, diversity is a bit of a passion for you and for me, and it always bothers me when we only get to that part of the conversation towards the end of the chat. So if you don't mind, I'd like to center it in our conversation today. And you very kindly shared with me the information about the Vistara Elevate Award that you've created, and I will put a link to the blog. It's required reading, team. So please read this blog. It was really very impactful for me, Randy. And I'd like to just read a bit from your words there. Vistara, as you've told us, is the Sanskrit word for expansion. In our world of finance, we think a lot about multiplier effects and return on investment. Our sincere hope is that we can help young women and men expand their scope of opportunities and achieve their full potential, becoming role models in their communities. I was really touched by the story you were telling there, and I know that you've launched this award. You've got your first recipient, Mikal, identified. Can you tell us a little bit more about the award and about her?
Yeah. The other, I guess, thing that we've all observed over the past year during this lockdown is some of the social injustices that we see in our society. We were a bit taken aback by a number of the events that happened, largely in the US, but also in other parts of the world and here in Canada as well. Racism, discrimination, those are things that just don't have a place in society, in our opinion. So as a team, we said, okay, what can we do? It was either make a donation somewhere or create something that we thought could be more impactful. So I teamed up with, our friends at BD, who launched this amazing program called BD Luminaries, which creates opportunity for kids that otherwise couldn't go to university. Ryan, and you should read about this program as well, created a foundation with $50 million that's going to support over 1,000 kids in terms of their being able to go to university when they otherwise couldn't. Our part of that is really focused on ethnic and racially diverse students that are looking to get into STEM or finance. We just don't see enough people, they identify as BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color. We just don't see enough of that in our tech community, and we don't see enough of it, frankly, in even the finance community. So we created the Elevate Awards. It's a 5-year program. It's a $100,000 commitment by ourselves as the team here at Vistara. It's more than just a check, though. For us, it's providing a scholarship. It's providing internship. So Mikal is going to join us here in a couple of weeks. She's going to be here for the summer. She's going to learn about finance, learn about growth capital, learn about tech companies. Unfortunately, a lot of it's going to be virtual, just given the circumstances. But she gets this will be her first job, right? So she's the eldest of 6 siblings, the first one in her family to go to university. So really exciting that she can be a role model then to her 5 younger sisters, who then see what she's doing and hopefully can emulate what she's doing. And then over and above that, we have one of our directors, Kathleen, who's kindly volunteered to mentor her for the next 4 years through this journey. So between the scholarship, the internship, and the mentorship, we think that we can make an impact. And as you said earlier in your comments, Jill, like if we can get going earlier on and create some of these, brighter futures, I think we're hopefully going to be in a better place.
It's really inspirational, and I've made a note. Ryan Beatty needs to be a guest on a future roundtable.
Absolutely, he should be. He should be on your show.
He's doing great work. But it's this is how change happens, right? When people step up and take actionable steps to make sure that the future can look different. So we thank you for that. It's a hallmark of BC's tech ecosystem that we're purpose-driven and seeking positive change in the world. But it's good to spend time on how.
One other one, Jill, if you allow me to, another shout out here is another organization I think that people know of, but maybe we we'd love to get more involvement in is social venture partners. They're also working very closely with children and youth at risk. This was started by some of the stalwarts of our tech community, Norm Francis, Ken Spencer, who we sadly lost recently, Paul Geyer, folks like that. We recently became engaged with them as a community business partner. So again, this is a way for our team to get involved with some of these charities. They've been gutting it for the last year and a half through COVID, right? These are, SVP represents 20 different charities focused on children and youth at risk. Another great way for people to hopefully get involved and get involved early with kids that otherwise might go astray. And then we see these types of problems reoccurring over time.
I love it. Okay, I've got quite a few action points now, so I appreciate that. I'm definitely going to follow up on those. Sure. Wonderful stories. So let's returning to your career as an investor and your passion to help tech companies grow and scale. The thing that is, I think, important to note is you don't operate just in BC. So you're making investments right across North America. Sure. Tell us a bit about that and maybe help us understand what's the context in BC, how does it differ from Ontario, how does it differ from America? What are your observations since you operate right across the space?
Yeah, location is actually an interesting thing these days because we're all a square on a screen somewhere, so it doesn't really matter where you are. But certainly, there's some great pockets in different parts of North America. We've got investments down in the Valley, in Seattle, in Austin, Texas, in the Midwest, in Chicago, and in Orlando. One of a great company we've invested in, based out of Orlando. Toronto's got a very strong ecosystem. We've recently have 2 people on the ground in Toronto now. So another thing we did during COVID is we opened a Toronto presence. So we hired 2 people. I've only met one of them, but it's going extremely well. So we need, when we look across the continent, you see growth happening everywhere in tech. And I think for a while, BC was running the risk of falling behind. You see some amazing tech stories coming out of BC now, a bit of a resurgence actually. And, when we met a couple of years ago at that Whistler Forum, we were talking about, do people have the ambition and the drive here, or is this more of kind of a lifestyle community? And I think people every day are proving that to be a fallacy, and they are trying to build huge companies here in BC in the tech sector. So, that was my biggest concern, frankly, and for us to have a fund of a few $100 million just focus on BC, we just wouldn't be able to put it to work. Hopefully we can put more and more of it to work here.
That's great to hear. But I think you're right. There has really been this resurgence. We've seen a market uptick in people's ambition and belief that, yes, they can. I want to make sure that we continue to build the pipeline for the future, that we continue to help startups to grow and scale and have ambition. I think there's still more potential in our tech sector than we're realizing today, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had a bunch of the earlier ones that set the stage, the Sierras and the ALIs, and then Vision Critical and Hootsuite and others. And don't count those out either. Like, those are very large companies, I think, that are continuing to redefine what they're doing, and I think we're going to hear really good things from those types of companies. And the recent crop, I guess, or not so recent crop, but at least the visibility on Clio and Galvanize and Thinkific and Dapper is just mind-boggling to me what they're doing. I met Roham back in 2018. I wish I took that meeting a lot more seriously. Lost me when he was talking about kitties, so I should have paid more attention, I guess. But and we're going to see more. We're going to see more. Global Relay is a fantastic company. Trulioo is a fantastic company. You're going to see more and more of these stories come out.
That's great. Listen, there's been a lot of activity. As we said, there's been strategic acquisitions. There's been financial buyers. So I want to ask you: is it bad news or good news when a company's acquired?
I think in all the deals you've seen, the companies have grown since they've been acquired. Salesforce bought Mobify, one of our companies. They're growing. You look at the investments that were made in traction on demand, for example. They're growing leaps and bounds. Galvanize will continue to grow. Clio's hiring lots of people. So, the tech companies are people companies at the end of the day. We have a great talent pool here. If you can continue to grow that talent pool, private equity. Private equity in the old school types of companies was a different model. So it was all about rationalization and driving profitability. If you look at our private equity, growth equity, later stage ventures approaching tech, it's all about driving growth. It's not necessarily about driving profitability. So if you're looking to drive growth, you need people to do it. So capital is going to find the companies. It's finding the companies. We should be very open to it and know that the IP sits in the cloud. It doesn't necessarily sit in Canada per se. So if we can accommodate more and more capital to come into our system, I think we're all the better.
Yeah, I think you're so wise. Intellectual property is very important, but it's just a subset of the intellectual capital that's in people's heads. And I'm going to steal that quote just to let you know, tech companies are people companies, and growth comes from increasing the number of people. Because there has been a little bit of confusion recently when I've heard people express that, when companies are acquired, they leave or they get smaller. And I actually can't think of any examples of that, but I can think of lots of examples of the opposite, where the extra capital enabled them to grow and go even further. And so it definitely depends, but it's definitely not bad news when we see new capital.
Over my 30 years, I've seen the reverse too. Everyone complained there was a shortage of capital, and when there's a shortage of capital, you got to shrink. So I think we should welcome the added capital, the added interest in the companies that we're building here with open arms.
Yeah. There's never been more capital. There's never been more interest. We just got to make sure that the companies get in front of the capital. Right? So, listen, you and I have talked before, talking about capital, about how many more options there are, how many more choices there are on capital than people sometimes think. And could you maybe talk us through some of your observations? Because you know so much more about this than most people in the ecosystem. And I know the audience will love to hear your observations.
Yeah, so I guess back when I started that family office fund, and then learning from the experience in the venture capital world, and now with Vistara, I guess for us, it's really flexibility in that growth capital. So not all capital is the same. Not everyone has to go down the same path. What's been remarkable over the past 10 years, and while we've been doing this, is the availability of debt capital for tech companies. So as for all the entrepreneurs on the call here today, equity is expensive. You're diluting your ownership in the business. There's times to do it. Equity is fantastic to attract. We do equity as well. But we also do debt. So, where you can access significant capital and not dilute yourselves, you should take advantage of that. So when there's so many options out there right now. Capital is looking to find a home. I think it behooves all founders, all CFOs, all board members to really explore what the options are. We've had numerous examples across our portfolio where we had one of our companies in Philadelphia that the founders exited. They still own 90% of the business. We have very successful companies, like Zafin and Core, where the founders still own majority of the business, despite having raised capital along the way. They've just done it very intelligently, used debt at various points in time, used convertibles, used different things. So, when the valuation environment is ready and exciting, which it is today, and your business has shown growth and hit all the metrics that people are looking for, that's the time to raise equity. So on the private side, I think looking at debt and equity is worthwhile doing. And then clearly there's all forms of capital these days. Public markets are open for bigger companies as well. I read this morning, there's like 15 tech IPOs lined up, ready to go in the next quarter or so. So your point is bang on. There is a lot of capital for the right companies.
Excellent. Well, we're going to do more work on this space, I think, because I'll be interested to hear feedback from the audience in the chat. But I think a bit more information and education around different sources of capital could be really valuable to our members. We're going to try and do some work on that next year. A reminder also to people, please raise your questions in the chat. No question too small, no question too large. We're happy to deal with all of them. But I've got a few more, so we'll keep going. Randy, when you think about the potential of BC's tech ecosystem, where do you see the biggest opportunities? Are there sectors that you're specifically interested in? Are there particular ideas or particular teams? What is it that really excites you? Where do you see as the biggest opportunity for us?
Yeah, I think there's really a strong breadth of opportunities. We've seen, traditional enterprise software companies grow to becoming very meaningful, platform companies per se. You also have this, I guess, history or legacy in BC where we have a very creative economy. Whether it's from gaming or creative arts or film or whatnot, and you look at the opportunities in those sectors, and we focus primarily in the enterprise space, so the more boring stuff, I guess. But when I look at the things that my kids are doing, and you look at the gaming environments, for example, like they'll spend an hour or two a day in Roblox, and that's the world that they live in. And you look at the success of those types of companies and the value that they've been able to generate. That's really exciting. And we have a ton of that type of talent here in BC on the creative side of things. So I think leveraging that talent and just people being more ambitious about how they can build their companies. If you truly believe we're in a creator economy, which I do, I think BC can do incredibly well in that. And then there's other, I think people aren't shy about revisiting their businesses and business models and pivoting into other areas. Another area that we're looking at closely is this concept of embedded finance. So any company that's in any form of transactional flow with their customers or employees or whatever it is, any of those companies could become a fintech company, for example. So I think just going at things creatively and aiming a bit higher, and not just because you've done something a certain way for 10 years, 20 years, don't presume that you have to keep doing it that way.
Those are some great observations. I hope nobody ever gets to see the avatar that I have built in Roblox, because my daughter, who is 8, is significantly more skilled than I am.
When they're asking for Robux for their Christmas gift instead of whatever they would normally ask for, it tells you something.
Exactly, and very creative. So listen, let's just unpack that a little bit. There's a lot going on in clean tech. Huge interest in really tackling climate change, and so quite a lot of focus and interest in that. So I know that's something people often talk about in BC, but we less often talk about the point you just made, which is let's think about creators and the creative economy and how many amazing successes there are when we think about it in that broader context. And I really link that back to the comment you made earlier, which is, tech companies are people companies, and BC is a wonderful place for people to flourish. So if we can somehow leverage that, we should naturally be a magnet for those kind of companies.
Yeah, and we we don't necessarily focus on the clean tech space. There's certainly a massive opportunity there, and I think BC is very well positioned for it. Life sciences as well. We've had some tremendous successes there with Accelera and Zymeworks and others, and these companies should be applauded, and hopefully that spins out other similar types of companies. On the creative side, we've got the lineage, we've got the electronic arts people that have spun out, we have all the gaming people that have spun out, and if there's different business models that can be put around that, so you're not just in the body shop work of creating the games, but you're actually creating things and creating these new universes that adults and kids and teenagers or whatever are going to live in. that could create some very, very interesting opportunities. So I mean, I'm excited to see. Like again, I bring up Dapper. You look at what they're doing, and that could be the biggest company to ever come out of British Columbia.
Yeah.
Could easily be. You know, they're not short of ambition in wanting to be that.
It's an amazing story, and not one that is told as often or as well as it should be. So I keep getting homework off of this particular roundtable, so thank you for that.
Well, no, I'm not Benedict Evans, but I can put you in touch with a few of these guys.
Exactly. No, that's wonderful. Yeah, you're hired. You're a booker now. All right. Just looking to the chat, I see. Great question, Matt. Do you have any words of advice, Randy, for companies when they're pitching? Are there any obvious do's and don'ts that you would emphasize?
Yeah, I guess even going back to my same as in my venture days, it ultimately is a bet on people. You've got to do your homework. Who's involved with your business, who can vouch for you. Create links. Do your diligence on the investors as well. What other companies have they invested in? Are you able to connect with any of the CEOs or entrepreneurs that they've backed, who can maybe vouch for you? So, if you're looking at creating a relationship, how can you make it as comfortable as possible? Your pitch, your business, everything, I think there's enough coaching and guidance out there you can get on the internet. It's the people side of things that is often forgotten. When we're looking at investing in a company, in our case, it's probably a 5 or so year commitment. For venture firms, it's more like a 10-year commitment. You want to work together. So do as much as you can on that front as you are on honing your actual pitch.
I think that's great advice. That's often forgotten, actually. This is a relationship, one of the big relationship choices you'll make, and making sure that.
It used to be the test. Like if you were stuck in an airport, would you want to hang out with this person for 2-3 hours? And I pine for those days now to be back in airports, but still, it's a similar type of test.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't enjoy spending time together when everything's great, you might not have a super lot of fun when things get a bit tricky. Very good advice. Let me just have another look at the chat. So Leanne's asking the question, what have been the biggest changes that you've seen in BC Tech's ecosystem during your career?
I think you've now got, before we were very concentrated around a couple of big companies. I think the fact that you have as many large companies now across a number of different industry verticals, that's been a marked change, I think, in terms of, there's sort of this doubt, can you build a big enterprise software company, or is it just, you're going to get so big and SAP is going to come and buy you and you're just going to be it? But Clio proved that wrong. Galvanize proved that wrong. Thinkific's proven that wrong. We have one of our companies, Zafin, in the banking software space. It's just as big as a few of these other companies. They're proving that wrong. So, just the fact that you have different anchor companies, I guess, developing in different areas, to me, has been the biggest change.
Yeah, I've got 2 obsessions: anchor companies and scale ups, helping companies to scale up and raise their eyes and their expectations.
I'm all over the scale up. So you tell me the ones that want to scale up, and we'll help them scale up.
Excellent. All right, that's an invitation to everybody in the audience. Let me go back to the chat because we've got some great questions here. So Grace is asking, do you have any thoughts on the InBC fund that the BC government launched?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I'm not intimately familiar with the details of it. I think any further investment in BC Tech is fantastic. It's a question of what form does it take? Is it direct investing? Is it investing in supporting managers that are investing? Both have their pros and cons. So I guess I'd probably reserve judgment at this point till I understand more about the program. I'd love to hear any feedback you have on it, but the private sector is doing a pretty good job allocating capital. And often, I would submit, I don't know who's on the call, so I should maybe be careful, but I'd submit maybe a better job of allocating capital. So I hope it's directed in the right way.
Great. Yeah, I think we're all super curious to see more sort of details emerge and what the investment strategy will be. But definitely a big initiative and a huge amount of money. So we're very interested to hear more details.
Yeah, the federal Vicky program, for example, is targeted towards investing in managers, and I know for a fact that it's really helped a bunch of the venture managers. We're not a Vicky recipient for our fund, but it's helped a bunch of the venture managers out east, as anchor investors in their funds, and these funds have gone on to do incredible things.
Because that is one of the gaps that we know we do have, right? We'd want to have more local capital if we could. So those kind of programs, I think, are really leverages the best of the private sector and public investment as well. Okay, let's go back to the chat. So Sunny is saying, do you foresee an upcoming influx of capital and interest for health tech and for startups in the health sector in BC, especially as we transition to come out of COVID?
Health tech is a very exciting sector everywhere. I wouldn't say it's BC would be alone in that. We have Kathleen in our group is focused on healthcare IT as a vertical that she's focused on. So I think absolutely. It's having companies that have a certain level of scale. Healthcare IT is quite interesting. You don't have the regulatory aspect of it that you do with med devices or life sciences. The one thing about Canadian healthcare IT, though, is the challenge we often see is that their solutions only apply in Canada, just given regulations and whatnot. So when we look at healthcare IT companies, honestly, we tend to look more at US companies for that, just because it's a bigger addressable market. So any of the ones that can crack the code on not having, a provincial border or a national border be an issue for them, I think that could be quite interesting.
Great insights. I'm seeing a question from Christine, which is, this is a great question. Thank you for raising it. So what would you say are the signs for a startup to start looking for investors? So is there an ideal window? Is it when you get to a particular size of staff or a particular size of revenues? Are there any rules to live by?
I guess the advice I would probably give is the longer you can bootstrap it, the better. The less your company you're going to give up. In the early days, there are fairly novel financing programs. Whether it's government funding or other grant programs you can get access to. I know a lot of companies, and this is earlier than we typically invest, so my knowledge here isn't perfectly up to snuff probably. I know there's others on the call that probably know more about this than I do. Safes are a very popular way for early stage companies to raise capital needed to get to certain proof points before you set a valuation on your company. For early stage investors, the one thing I hear is that it's, before it was pretty common that you could invest in these companies at sort of a $2-3 million valuation. The entry valuations now are more like 5 to 10 million, and the seed rounds aren't 500K. They're more like 2 to 3 million. So if you've got a great team and a great idea, I wouldn't be shy about it. Show some of those initial proof points, get some initial customers, have your product ready. It's different for companies in different sectors. If you're a healthcare company and you have to get certain regulatory approvals or whatnot, you don't have customers, but you can show milestones. And then if you can hit those milestones, get investors involved with you that can keep supporting you along the way.
That's great advice. Maybe just to add my own 2 cents, I'd say be ready to scale. When you go and seek new investors, they'll be looking for you to go even faster and even further than you've been going. So be ready for that. Get yourself investor ready. Get yourself scale up ready. and understand fully how much you need and you want and who the ideal partners would be. What do you most need from, as Randy says, there's a lot of capital out there. What's the smartest capital for you? What's the source of capital that's going to help your company scale? That's going to open doors for your company. That's going to give you value add beyond the dollars. So just have a really clear sense of what are you looking for in your ideal partner?
And you know, those connections, the introductions, just people that have been through it. Luckily now there's been entrepreneurs that have sold their companies or monetized, and they're now reinvesting as angels, you know, being board members, advisors, whatnot. And get some of those folks involved with your company as early as you can.
Yeah, there's absolutely no substitute for taking advice from people who've actually done it.
Everyone's around these days. You can't go anywhere, so everyone's available.
That is true. Yeah, that window is closing. You're going to be in an airport sometime soon.
They're hanging out in Maui and Arizona right now. They're hanging out in BC looking for something to do.
Excellent. Tracy's asking a question in the chat. Let me ask that, and then we'll maybe close this off. So, Tracy's saying, I read a stat the other day that only 6% of Canadian post-secondary graduates are actually graduating with an IT discipline, and that we need 50% more than that to keep up with job growth. So, what do you think has to be done to increase the number of people who are interested in it as a career and increase the capacity of the system to educate those workers? Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I guess I look at programs that are being instituted at our kids' school, you know, and granted they're, this is like grade 6 and grade 4 stuff, so it's a little early for them, but you know, IT is becoming a core part of the curriculum. I think it will continue to increase, but I think we got to watch definitions a little bit. You know, I think communication skills are tremendously undervalued. When we think about IT, you look at the ability to communicate your product vision and communicate a company vision. You know, being a really good writer, being a really good communicator, I think those people could have amazing careers in IT, for example. So I wouldn't just limit it to the programming element of it. It's people that just embrace tech overall, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in product, whether you're in sales, whether you're in finance. If there is a belief that every company is a tech company, or every company should be a tech company. So maybe it's less about being, graduating with an IT degree, but it's just, graduating with a degree that allows you to work in any company. And if all companies are tech companies, well, hey, you're in the IT business then.
Exactly. That's great. Yeah, certainly when I talk to employers about what skill sets they're looking for, I hear problem solving, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, enthusiasm for working in teams, not being intimidated by big problems, and none of those so far have mentioned specific, technology skills. So those are the skills that employers are looking for in tech.
Even investing mainly in B2B or enterprise software companies, like the consumerization of all of those product offerings is amazing, and it's because at the other end of the screen there's a human being. It's not corporate to corporate type thing. So there's a lot of different areas that people can improve themselves.
And I had a wonderful example the other day. Veronica came home from school. She's grade 3, and she said, design thinking is very interesting, Mommy. I thought the line between my work conversations and my home conversations is becoming blurred these days, which is great to see and hear.
Yeah. I think it's schools are doing a good job. Everyone can do a better job, of course, but I think the schools are doing a good job with this.
Yeah. Me too. It's been a challenging year for them, and they've been resilient, and they've been creative, and they've really kept us going. So we're very grateful to educators across province. Listen, before we close off, what's next? What's going on? Can you tell us anything about what's new at Vistara, or what you might do next?
Well, my lawyers tell me I can't announce new funds or anything like that, but we're almost done investing of our third fund, so don't be surprised if there's another one. We're growing our team. We're up to 9 people now, so we're looking to. I'd love to find a really good kind of full-time marketing resource if anyone has one. We're working with a contract group, and she's fantastic, but having somebody internally would be great. We're growing out our Toronto presence. We want to have more feet on the street there. So yeah, it's about growth for us. We continue to see the opportunity in the market to continue to support these fantastic companies and help them grow with flexible, different forms of capital. And for us around here, it's all about enablement. Like, we want to enable these companies. We want to enable our people. We want to, enable others in society and give them opportunities. And that's what gets me up every morning.
Oh, it's inspiring. Thank you. Listen, any final parting words of advice to our startups, to our entrepreneurs on the line?
It's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, really. Like I saw that earlier quote, and I couldn't agree more. Just the opportunities out there, the ideas out there, it doesn't cost a whole lot to try something these days. With all the cloud infrastructure out there, I'd say try it. There's a ton of capital out there. Capital will find you. If you're scaling your business, you have a good idea and a good team, capital will find you. Be an entrepreneur and aim big.
Fantastic. From your lips to their ears. Thank you again, Randy. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for your insights, and thanks to our audience for some superb questions. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for what you do at BC Tech. It's great that you keep raising the profile. We appreciate that.
To infinity and beyond.